Hello and welcome to my vlog on Henry Jenkins's text, Textual Poaching. So this seminal text, Star Trek Rerun, Reread, Rewritten, Fan Writing as Textual Poaching, opened the floodgates for research and criticism on fandom when it was released in 1992. It explores the active role that audiences play in rereading and reworking texts in order to suit their own social situation. As Jenkins puts it himself, fandom is a vehicle for marginalised subcultural groups to pry open space for their cultural concerns within dominant representations. It is a way of appropriating media texts and rereading them in a fashion that serves different interests, a way of transforming mass culture into popular culture. This idea of the role of a fan being solely for a marginalised subcultural group seems outdated from a modern perspective, and Jenkins himself admitted in his later text, Fans, Bloggers and Gamers, Exploring Participatory Culture, that the way society sees an active audience has shifted. He says the concept was controversial 2 decades ago, but is now taken for granted by everyone involved in and around the media industry. So what did Jenkins mean when he claimed these subcultural groups pry open space for their cultural concerns? He's basically saying that one of the key features of being a fan is the idea of reshaping your favourite movie or TV show to reflect your own life in some way, to interpret the text in a deeper or different way and to play an active role in reproducing it. As he puts it in Textual Poaching, a fan audience fragment texts and reassemble the broken shards according to their own blueprint. I can't argue with the example that Jenkins gives to support his claims. According to Textual Poachers, there were more than 300 amateur press publications of Star Trek by 1992. Basically, fans had created their own spin-off Star Trek storylines and had them published. However, I do think that Jenkins is perhaps missing a trick when he claims that fans want to manipulate their favourite texts to suit their own social experiences. He seems to overlook the respect that an active audience usually has for the author or authors of their favourite movies or shows, and the desire they feel to remain authentic to the fictional world that has been created by them. As Jenkins says, to enter fandom is to escape from the mundane into the marvellous. I would argue then that fans prefer to immerse themselves in this marvellous world rather than to manipulate it, and to remain true to the world by all means necessary. One example of this would be the extreme fans of The Lord of the Rings, who have learned to communicate through the elfish languages that J.R.R. Tolkien developed throughout his life. In order to truly immerse themselves in the Middle Earth, fans and scholars have painstakingly written various elfish dictionaries. David Sarlo, one academic/fan who helped translate Tolkien's fictional language, still updates his blog regularly in pure Sindarin, the most common elfish dialect. If what Jenkins says is true, that fandom is about rereading text in a fashion that serves different interests, why would these fans be so keen to remain true to Tolkien's fictional language? For these extreme Lord of the Rings fans, rewriting the elfish dialects is totally out of the question, as it is the strict adoption of Tolkien's language that allows them to escape into the Middle-earth and to prove themselves as a true fan. Perhaps a more current example would be George R.R. Martin's series of books Game of Thrones. The hugely popular TV show adaptation has extended the fandom of the series, and there's been a growing concern that the author may pop his clogs before he gets to finish the last book. As a result of this, George R.R. Martin sat down with the producers of the show and told them in detail his vision on how the story will end. This contented fans worldwide, as they are immersed in the fantasy world created by that one author, and would not want anyone else to simply pick up the story where he left off if he never got to finish it. To link this back to Jenkins, the audience of Game of Thrones may well create their own homage to the series through something like a fan film, and in this way would be rereading the text in a fashion that serves their different interests. However, I would argue that a fan's predominant interest is immersing themselves in the world that the author has created, escaping from the mundane into the marvellous by striving to be as authentic a fan as possible. Ultimately, it seems that fandom is no longer associated with these marginalised subcultural groups, and so is used less and less as a platform to pry open space for their cultural concerns with dominant representations. I believe the modern day fan is a mainstream persona and is focused primarily on embracing the fantasy world as wholly as possible, rather than manipulating it to reflect their social representation. Thanks.